Daisy's float enables her to maneuver quickly between aerial and grounded space. Understanding how to threaten different options quickly and punish your opponent accordingly takes practice. In this guide, I will not only be giving you steps to properly learn the complexities of her movement, but I'll also aim to teach you how to then apply these techniques practically in your gameplay. When learning any advanced technique, I believe there are 3 steps any player must go through to learn this new option. First, you need to understand the sequence of motions and inputs that comprise the technique, so begin by breaking these down and putting them into steps. Then, you need to train your hands to input these motions with the correct timing. And finally, the most important step is to figure out how this new option can be integrated into your own style to generate advantage for you in a match. In my beginner's guide, I went over all the basics of ground floating as well as head height float, so I recommend you watch the movement section in that video as a starting point. Since you should already know the basics of ground floating, we will begin by going over some variations and uses for this technique. Firstly, doing ground float aerials while holding a turnip or any other item requires a slightly more precise timing. While with normal ground float aerials, you can input your aerial to come out after you've let go of float, with an item, the move must come out before letting go of float. Otherwise, you'll input an item throw. This type of ground float aerial is slightly less safe than without an item because of this, so using proper spacing is essential to ensure you remain safe when applying pressure this way. You should also practice how to utilize floating aerials with the turn-up at varying heights as well. Next is quick float release, or QFR for short. This is simply a ground float that you let go of as soon as it starts. In previous games, this technique has been used to bypass the skidding animation that occurs when turning around after your run has begun. In this game, the turnaround time can be dealt with in a faster way by just letting go of your control stick during your run and subsequently dashing in the opposite direction. Although the usefulness has been reduced, the movement option can still occasionally be used as a way to fake an aerial and go for a grab, or it can be used as a way to cancel your initial dash. While talking about running and floating, your momentum prior to entering float is carried over to some degree, so by inputting a dash before ground floating, you'll get a burst of forward momentum at the start of your float. Also has some applications with turn-ups and item play, which I'll go into more in a following video. Next, you should learn how to do turnaround ground floats. To do this, you have to begin by entering a run, then initiate the turnaround as you would with a reverse aerial rush, and finally, transition into the float. If you do the turnaround input very quickly, you'll be able to retain your momentum through the motion, but if you're slower with it, Daisy will stop or begin floating backwards when the float begins. The reason this happens is because you've left too much time before inputting the opposite direction, which will begin your run that way instead of canceling from a skid. Both methods are useful, so try to learn the different timings. This option allows you to go for approaching ground float back airs, and again has some item play uses. Finally, you should practice using ground float out of shield. While a bit slower than buffering an aerial out of shield, the float enables Daisy to adjust her spacing so that she can punish moves that end farther away. It usually allows for a bigger punish, and can help you hit short characters that a short hop aerial would miss. Jump Cancel Fast Fall, or JCFF for short, is an exceedingly useful and quick movement option that can speed up your overall gameplay. Learning this technique can be a bit frustrating, especially if you already have muscle memory for using float during your jump. And the reason for this is that the inputs are the exact same for this technique. The difference is all based on the timing of when you let go of your jump button. So, begin by pressing and holding down your jump button until your desired height, but before the apex. Then, press down on your control stick and release the jump button almost simultaneously. Technically, the downwards input should come before you let go of jump, but because the timings happen so close together, it can be easier to think that they happen at the same time. Once you start to become proficient with the basic inputs, you can then incorporate differing momentums as well as your double jump, which can give your momentum another boost. Short hop to immediate double jump, cancelled into a float, can be used as a quick movement backwards or forwards that can also be cancelled into a fast fall with JCFF if desired. The point of the double jump here is to allow you to quickly change speed or speed up your momentum in a given direction in order to avoid hitboxes or punish an opponent. You can also input an attack right as the fast fall comes out to put out some tricky diving hitboxes. If you still have your float when grabbing onto the ledge, Daisy has access to a few more options to help her take back stage control. By choosing jump from the ledge, you can then instantly cancel it with your float. Again, continue holding the jump button after the initial press, and continue holding down immediately after. Once here, you can nair, drop and hold shield, or possibly fair as well. To add to this idea, you can choose jump and decide to wait to start your float until you're at head height, which threatens some different options. Consider jump cancel fast falling here as well for some more mix-ups. After leaving hit stun, it can be useful to use your double jump away into a float to avoid an enemy being overly greedy. This can put you in prime position for retaliating if they whiff a move or overextend their positioning. The princess's float also allows her to use a better version of wave landing onto platforms. By cancelling your jump right above the platform, you can time it so that you land without any lag, which then lets you go for a grab on an opponent expecting aerial pressure. My preferred way of doing this is by full hopping, double jumping, and cancelling into a jump cancel fast fall. Make sure you let go of holding down as quickly as you can, otherwise you'll simply fall through the platform. Some of Daisy's moves, when used while landing, shifts her positioning a bit, so you can occasionally use this to space far enough away to avoid some attacks. Something else that is important to keep in mind is short hop aerials do less damage, knockback, and shield stun. Ground floats are usually performed by cancelling a full hop, so you'll be able to benefit from the better aerials. Also, using your double jump will give you the better aerial as well, even when used out of a short hop, so make sure you aren't using the inferior variations in situations that you don't have to. In my last video, I went over my recommended controls, where I told you to change one of your shoulder buttons to jump to help with floating. Recently though, I've seen some confusion as to what situations you should be using the shoulder jump and when to use your standard jump button instead. There isn't an exact concrete answer for this, and you should experiment to find whatever method allows you to move in the ways you want to. Personally, I always press X when I'm going for a short hop, and most of the time when I'm going for a full hop. Whenever I plan on stopping my momentum with the float or going for a JCFF, I always use my L button because that's just what I find easier. When I do short hop into double jump quickly, I'll use X first to input the initial jump, and follow it up with L for the double jump and transition into float. These aren't rules you must follow though, so try to find what input methods you find easiest. While Daisy has an enormous amount of movement options in this game, simply inputting them without thought will create openings in your own defenses. Knowing when and how to use each of these advanced movements can be difficult to figure out when first learning. Unfortunately, I can't give you a comprehensive list of every situation you should be using each of these in. However, it will become more obvious to you through experience and trying things out. If you are constantly being punished when using your movement, try taking a step back and figuring out why it's happening. And maybe you'll find there's another movement pattern or more simple solution that can be more effective. Take this situation as an example. Head height floating with dare pressure and my opponent's reactions and options to deal with the situation. My opponent is forced to try and deal with me quickly regardless because of the inherent advantage this position gives me. As I float towards them, they must choose some kind of commitment or they will continually lose stage control, which generates advantage for me. As I've outlined before, this float position avoids most of a character's grounded options, including the most typical forms of breaking space, a dash attack. Most characters' fastest option at this point to deal with floating in this way would be to short hop in either back air or forward air to contest my space. After I condition my opponent to become comfortable with my floating pattern, I decide to use JCFF to jump and prompt the down air situation I have shown my opponent, before quickly landing back on the ground, shielding their now misspaced aerial and punishing their commitment. This isn't necessarily a situation you should base your main strategy behind, but thinking about how your movement patterns can affect your interactions like this can help you understand the purpose behind using some of these movement options. If there isn't structure and directed purpose behind your movements, then you're most likely leaving yourself open unnecessarily. Another thing you should keep in mind is the way that you are facing, especially when using float movement. If I float facing my opponent, then forward air is the option that's constantly being threatened, as opposed to if I floated towards them facing the other way, I would be threatening the quicker, less rangy, and less deadly back aerial. Peach's quick movements allow her to threaten and fake options quickly, while also being able to change trajectory and motion to accommodate for your opponent's options. Always keep in mind what options you can threaten in a given situation, along with what your opponent can do. Since float movement is so open-ended, this is where you can start to hash out your own personal playstyle a bit more, as different Peach players will deal with similar situations in their own way, depending on their preferences. A good way to ingrain positive tendencies with movement is to watch how top players move in different situations, and compare it to how you would tackle the same situation. I believe that while top players are leading the Peach meta, they're still learning too by experimenting and grinding the character. So try out ideas you have for yourself, let yourself make mistakes, and learn through trial and error. Who knows, maybe you'll even discover something entirely new. Hey guys, I just wanted to thank you so much for the positive reaction I got from my previous video, and I hope that this one was another step in the right direction. I do apologize that it took me so long to get this video out, but I've had some hand pains lately and had to rest them for a while. So as a sort of PSA, if you're using any of these techniques regularly in your gameplay, you need to stretch and make sure you aren't overexerting yourself. A lot of these techniques I originally learned from EOE and Dark Peach's Smash 4 videos, so check out their channels if you have the time. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again in my next video.